friends. For those who are just tuning in for the first time, I'm Kat. I'm a wife, a homeschool mom, and an avid reader. I'm just checking in. It is July now, and so I wanted to give a update of my reading for the month of June. During June, I read 15 books, 5,011 pages, and I had a great reading month. And I'm so excited to share some of the books that I've read. The first book I completed in June is Crave by Tracy Wolff. In this book, we meet Grace. Grace is dealing with the unfortunate events of her parents' death. They have died in a car accident, and she is now in the care of her uncle. Her uncle is the principal of a high school in Alaska, and so she's not only dealing with normal high school stuff and the bereavement of her parents, but also with living in a totally different climate. She's from sunny California and now is living in the polar Alaska. This book is a lot of fun. Throughout the book, we find that Grace is the only human in a supernatural high school, and she's just trying to make it through her final year of high school. Throughout this, we meet some interesting characters, such as Jackson, who is a vampire, and all the politics that go along with all these supernatural beings going to school together. I probably would rate this book a 4.25 to a 4.5. I do use Storygraph, which gives quarter stars, which is really nice, especially for a reader like me who, unless I do not finish a book, I am not likely to give it below 3 stars. I can see where authors have poured their hearts into these books, into writing these books, and I also know that not every book is for every reader. So for me to give it a 4.25 to a 4.5 really is kind of in the middle of my reading. But yeah, I really enjoyed this one. I am looking forward to reading the next one. It will either be sometime in July or August that I read the next one, so that I'm ready for the new release in November. The next book I read during June is When You Trap a Tiger. This is a Korean folktale retelling. It follows our main character, Lily. She and her family move in with her grandmother, who is aging and really should not be on her own anymore. Throughout this book, we really see Lily start to come of age and deal with the hardships of growing up and realizing that the things that we remember, or the things that we picture and value, sometimes aren't always as they seem. Lily, the last time that she had lived with her grandmother, she was really little and has like this picturesque imagining of moving back in with her grandmother. And throughout the story, we see some parts where not only does Lily have to grow up, but she gets to see how her grandmother and her mother's relationship growing up, as her mother was growing up, and how the town views her grandmother is very different than how she herself views her grandmother. This is a book that is really meant for middle graders. I enjoyed it. It probably, if I were to give a star rating, would be a low 4. And most of that has to do with the fact that I don't feel I was the target audience. As a mom reading this, I really enjoyed some of the aspects of seeing how kids view events, but it wasn't quite a favorite of mine for the month. The third book I read during June was Ready Player 2 by Ernest Cline. This one picks up about a year after Ready Player 1, and has a lot of longer time jumps in it than our first book. Our first book all takes place within about a year of meeting Wade. This one, if I remember correctly, it covers about 15 years. And in that time, you want to see Wade act 15 years older. And he doesn't really. This one, I enjoyed a lot of the current, or what's current for us, the current cultural nods and mentions in here. But this one fell a little flat for me compared to Ready Player 1. This I would probably give a 3.5. I enjoyed parts of it. The overarching storyline was good, but some of that nostalgia that I really enjoyed with Ready Player 1 just wasn't there. It was more common or more current events for me that was in this book. The next book that I read during June is The Last Time I Lied by Riley Sager. This story follows Emma Davis and has a dual timeline. We see some events from the first time that our main character, Emma, was at Camp Nightingale, and the events that happened there that changed her life. Then we have 15 years later, we see Emma returning to Camp Nightingale, and her dealing with so many things that were the same. The campgrounds, the cabins and everything haven't really changed, but the kids there have. And Emma herself has. And so we have this dual timeline that jumps back and forth. And this book is a thriller, so I don't really want to give too much away with this book, but we do know that events happened during Emma's first stay there that greatly affect her life and how she moves forward. This book I really loved. Riley Sager did a great job on this one. This book was probably one of my highest rated. I would give this one a 4.75. The twists in the book really kept me pushing forward through the novel. This one, I listened to this one while I crocheted working on my genre blanket. It was a lot of fun. I do not regret branching out into the thriller genre. I'm not a big thriller reader just because after I read so many of them, nothing really surprises me anymore. And so I don't want to get to a point where they aren't that palate cleanser for me. During the month of June, I did read quite a few thrillers. I read 2 thrillers, whereas most years I only read 1 or 2 for the whole year. I am looking forward to reading some more Sager throughout the year until I end up at that point where he's no longer surprising me with his plot twists. Another book that I read during June is The Dark One by Nikki St. Crow. The Dark One is the second book in the Vicious Lost Boys series. I picked the first one up during the Late Night Cruise Smut Den. This one is this series, if you can't tell by the series name, is a Peter Pan dark retelling. In the first book, The Never King, we meet Peter Pan and we meet one of Wendy Darling's descendants. In this series, we find that Peter Pan is looking for information and only the Darlings can give it to him. And so on their 18th birthday, he kidnaps them. He kidnaps one of the Darling girls, and in this series, we're following one particular Darling and how she overcomes just her life and the things that she has had to deal with. And we see some of Peter Pan's dealings with what he has caused with the Darlings. This series is fun, but it is a spicy one. So if you do not like open door romance scenes, this book is not for you. That being said, I would rate this one, The Dark One, as a 4.25. I did not enjoy it as much as The Never King, but at the same time, it did help to give a little bit of understanding of Captain Hook and his role that he plays in Neverland. The next book that I read during June was Survive the Night by Riley Sager. This was another thriller, and it follows a college student in the 1990s. We have this college student is dealing with the disappearances that have gone on her college campus the last few years. And in this, it even includes the loss of her best friend and roommate. Our main character gets into a vehicle and does like a ride share with a college student from the school, but she doesn't know him. And so we have a lot of moments in this book where, from the point of view from someone in 2022, we want to go, what is wrong with you? You don't get in the car with someone you don't know, especially with all that's going on in your school. I was able to set some of that aside because Sager really does a great job of explaining where our main character's mind is at. And the twists and turns throughout this, some of them I was expecting, some of them I was not. And it was a great read. I, like a lot of readers though, felt that the end was kind of a cop-out. The way that Sager ends the novel leaves a little bit to be wanting, in my opinion. I would probably give this book a 4 stars because of the way that he ended it. It really felt that he was trying to give readers the best of both worlds, and it did not sit well with me. Another book that I read in June was A Good Girl's Guide to Murder by Holly Jackson. In this book, we meet Pip, who is a senior in high school and writing her final paper on a murder that happened at her school. Popular student Andy Bell was murdered by her boyfriend years before, but Pip, for some reason, cannot believe it. And so she sets off on a mission to find out why Sal would have done this. And throughout the book, we get to see Sal's brother, along with other people who were friends with Andy and Sal, and getting the picture of how a good person, or seeming good person, could do such a horrific act. This book I would give 4.5 stars. I really enjoyed it. It was well written, and even though it's a young adult, there were things in it that kept it from being like a young adult. And I really enjoyed the book. My sister and I did it as a buddy read, and so we sat and read it and just had a good time. It gave us a lot of Truly Devious vibes, and a lot of those kind of, as the reader on the outside, you sit and look at the young detective character and you're like, what are you doing? Why are you doing that? Don't do that. So it was a lot of fun. Another book that I read in June was An Enchantment of Ravens by Margaret Rogerson. In this book, we meet Isabel, who lives outside of the fairy courts. And she is an artist and regularly paints the fair folk, especially the spring courts leader. And throughout this book, we have Isabel's talents are almost exploited, and she finds a way to get back at the fair folk through it. This one was a lot of fun. It is a standalone, so if you're looking for a fantasy standalone, it's definitely a great one. I am looking forward to Rogerson's Vespertine. That one is a series. I've enjoyed all of Margaret Rogerson's books so far. This one I gave a 4.5. I really enjoyed it. This one really plays on the plot line, this one really plays on the plot line of the human being kidnapped by the fair folk that we've seen several times. And that would really, for this one, be my only complaint, is that while there were differences, it wasn't completely a new concept. Another book I read during the month of June is Sea Witch by Sarah Henning. In this, we meet Evie, who lives by the sea. In her town, she is the daughter of the royal boat maker. And she is best friends with the crown prince. This does cause some problems between the royal family, especially the queen and her son's kind of relationship. The queen believes that her son should not be hanging out with this common girl, especially with events that have happened in the past. Evie and the crown prince have both dealt with the death of another friend, Anna, but one day a girl who looks just like Anna appears. And so we have this Little Mermaid retelling, and this one I really wanted to like. I bought this a few years ago. It's been sitting on my shelf. And I really, really, really wanted to like this one. This one is a very young adult. I would definitely put this in the hands of my almost 12-year-old daughter and let her enjoy it. But it's very hard as an adult to enjoy as much as those young middle grade or those middle to high school readers would. So lots of fun if you kind of like to see the if you like to see the origin stories. This one was a lot of fun. Another book I read in June was Isn't It Romantic by Lisa K. Adams. In this series, the Bromance Book Club, we usually follow one of the gentlemen through his romance adventures. In this one, we are following the Russian and his wife of convenience. Also in it, we get to see Vlad's novel that he's been writing. This one was hilarious. I really enjoyed the Bromance Book Club and remember sitting up all night reading and laughing through the novel. I lost some of that in books 2 and 3, but in this one, that feeling was back. I sat up until way after midnight, way after my bedtime, and just laid in bed laughing through the novel. This one, I would give 4.75 stars. It was a great time through the book, and I could see many people enjoying it. This is a romance novel, and there are open door romance scenes, so if that is not something that you enjoy, then this probably would not be a good pick for you. But if you like comedy with your romance, this was an amazing book. The next book I read in June was Well Matched by Jen DeLuca. This is the third book in the Well Played series, in which we are in a small town in Maryland that every year has a Renaissance fair. Visit it. This Renaissance fair is mostly run by several of the high school teachers, and they allow the students to come in and play a part in it as part of like an extra credit assignment during the summer. In this one, we are following April. She is a single mom and has almost no interest in the Renaissance fair, other than her daughter is in love with the Renaissance fair and participates in it. We also have Mitch Malone, who is very much involved in the Renaissance fair. He is the Scotsman, and during the summer walks around in a kilt. Well, one day shortly before April's daughter's high school graduation, April is sitting in the bar with a letter from her ex-husband, who has decided that now that his daughter is grown up, he wants a part in her life. And as April is trying to navigate this, she's sitting at the town bar, and another guy comes up and is hitting on her, and she has no interest whatsoever. Mitch, seeing this, kind of inserts himself into the situation and asks April for a return favor of pretending to be his girlfriend for a family event. And as with many fake dating tropes, Mitch and April find that there is more connection there than they realized. I really enjoyed this one. It didn't take me too long to read it. It was a lot of fun. I would probably give this one a 4.25. It was not the strongest in the series. And the Renaissance Fair is kind of pushed off to the last half of the book. But it is a whole lot of fun. This one does also have open door scenes, though not quite as many as Isn't It Romantic, but it is a lot of fun. Another book that I read during June was Edge Dancer by Brandon Sanderson. This one is following Lift from the Stormlight Archive. This book takes place between the second book, Words of Radiance, and the third book, Oathbringer. But we met Lift in the first book, Way of Kings. And if you have read past and you don't really remember Lift, Sanderson does a great job in the prologue to give the account of Lift that we see in The Way of Kings. In this series, we have another world that has these yearly storms that come through. They use what's called stormlight as their currency, but there is a group of people who can use stormlight to give them certain abilities. And those who can use these abilities also have what's called a spren that is kind of guiding them and leading them through. In Edge Dancer, we have Lift, who doesn't use stormlight in the traditional sense. She gets stormlight through what she eats. So she will eat regular food and her body takes that as if she had absorbed this stormlight. Lift and her spren Wendell, who she is convinced is a void bringer, not a spren, leave the city that they are in to chase after a man that Lift calls Darkness, so that she can figure out what's going on with him and why he doesn't like other people. This one was a lot of fun. Seeing Lift and her backstory, along with filling in the blanks that we have of her life between what we see in The Way of Kings and when we see her again in Oathbringer, was really nice. And having that understanding of how she went from meeting Wendell through to becoming a full Night Radiant. I gave this one is probably my highest rating of the month. This definitely was a 5-star for me. Another book I read during June was A Gentleman in Moscow. This is by Amor Towles. In this book, we start in Russia in 1922. This is shortly after World War I, when the Bolsheviks are taking over after the rebellion in Russia. In this book, we meet the Count, and the Count is a well-known poet in Russia, and his life is spared because one of his poems was used to fuel the rebellion. This book, I had a love-hate relationship with this book. When I was reading this book, I loved it. It was real fun to see this Count under house arrest in the Metropole Hotel, and seeing how he's adjusting to life. Once I closed the book or had to take a break, though, it was really hard for me to pick it back up and keep going. I had to kind of set myself daily goals to move through this book, because I could have easily stalled out there at the end of June in this book. A lot of my trouble picking this book up was that this book is very character driven. The books that for me are unputdownable are plot driven books. And this book very much felt like it was going nowhere. Some of that, though, is the author's intent, because the Count can't leave the hotel. He has been told in our first chapter that if he leaves the hotel, his life is forfeit. And so we have kind of this dichotomy that things are happening through the book, but there is a struggle because things aren't happening either. You're stuck in the hotel with the Count throughout most of the book. By the time you get to the end, the afterword, as Towles calls it, a lot of fun. The pace really picks up, and I did not want to put the book down at that point. But that's the last 30 pages or so. I really did enjoy this book. This book I would give a 4.5 stars. It is well written. I would not put it in the hands of everyone. If you are a plot driven reader, this book may not be for you. Another book that I read in June was Waiting for Tom Hanks by Carrie Winfrey. In this book, we meet Annie Cassidy, who loves rom-coms. Her hero is Nora Ephron. And through this book, we get glimpses of Annie's past and why rom-coms mean so much to her, and how she has spent most of her adult life looking for Tom Hanks. She does explain in the book that she's not looking for Tom Hanks, the actor. She is looking for the Tom Hanks characters that we see in these rom-coms. So as she's looking for guys, she wants someone who lives in a houseboat, or the character traits of the characters that he plays. And throughout this book, there are lots of moments of laughs, and Annie is not only a rom-com lover, she's actually gone to college to get a degree in movies, or in the line of movies, and has dreams of being a screenwriter. But she doesn't want to leave her hometown of Columbus, Ohio, which movies don't really get produced there until one does. And she becomes the assistant to the director of a rom-com that is being filmed in her hometown. This book was a lot of fun. There was moments where you just want to strangle all the characters because they're being idiots, that common rom-com type moment where you're like, what are you doing? What are you thinking? This, while being a romance, had didn't have the open door scenes that we see in Isn't It Romantic or Well Matched. These kind of fade to black, so they'll start kissing, and when things heat up, it moves on. So if you prefer not to have your spicy scenes on the page, this one would be right up your alley. I really enjoyed this book. I would give it a 4.5 stars. I had a great time listening to, or no, I was reading this one. I had a great time reading this one on my Kindle, and it was a perfect summer kind of beach read book, even though it takes place in the middle of winter in Ohio. The final book that I finished in June is Wicked Beauty by Katie Robert. This is another Dark Olympus book, or from the Dark Olympus series. In the first book, we followed Persephone and Hades. In the second book, we followed one of Persephone's sisters and Apollo, I believe. In this one, we are following Zeus's little sister, Helen, and Achilles and Patroclus. This one is a male-female romance. It was interesting, though, to kind of have that other side. But in this, we see a lot of jealousy and kind of, concern of one or another of the characters moving on. This is a dark romance. There are a lot of open door scenes. It is a very spicy story. But the part that I liked about it is, while there are a lot of spicy scenes, there's also a lot of plot and a lot of character development throughout it. we have all three characters are not only trying to figure out their relationship as a threesome or as a throuple, but also they're all striving and competing against each other in the trial, in the 3 trials to who becomes the next Aries. This one was a lot of fun. It does follow a lot of the normal storyline of romance novels. So, you know, we have the characters meeting, them facing different obstacles, and eventually overcoming. But all of that, it's the ride there to get them to their happy ending, as it were. There were some twists that, or some unexpected turns that this book took, and you definitely are left a few moments where you think all is lost. I really enjoyed this one. This one, while it was interesting to kind of see that male, female relationship, that normally isn't really my kind of cup of tea, and had this been the first or second book, I probably would not have continued the series. It being where it is, I had enough investment that I did want to continue, and I'm looking forward to the 4th book coming out soon. But yeah, it definitely gives some of that, let's put a modern twist on a well-known tale. But I did enjoy the ride overall. I would probably give this one a 4.25 stars, just because it wasn't exactly my preference. But it did surprise me, and I had a good time. And there you have it, friends. 15 books that I read in June. What of your reads in June was your favorite? Leave me a comment below to let me know, so that I could maybe check it out, or if I've already read it, we can have a discussion about it. Please like and subscribe to my channel. I'll see you next time.